But this one's personal. Richard Blystone, CNN, New York.
And as Richard mentioned, for some, the search for answers is deeply personal, triggered by the uncertainty of what really happened to a loved one who worked in one of the buildings that were attacked. Candy Crowley has a story of a father trying to locate his missing daughter who worked at the Trade Center building in New York.
Yes, Dan? Yes, this is David Vincent.
He's an Eastman Kodak executive from Webster, New York. A man with a problem to solve, a man on a mission.
How is it being set up so that I can make the best use of my time? Because you're working a timeline here. You have to get to your daughter as fast as you can.
Melissa is missing. She's a technology recruiter at Alliance Consulting.
But we know that that's 102nd floor of Tower 1.
The enormity of what's happened in David Vincent's life shows on his face, but does not slow his step.
Please take a picture. Please focus on the picture. To get her face out there so that
working on 3 hours sleep and a couple of crackers, he protects his fondest hopes, battles his worst fears, and sometimes loses.
I don't have any video of her. To be honest with you, Melissa didn't like to be videoed. She used to holler at me every time I did. I'd give anything to have her holler at me right now.
I'd give anything, he says, to have her holler at me right now. It's a rare lapse. Mostly, there is a desperate monotony to his mission.
I know she made a 911 call at 9:02:07.
It's all that David Vincent knows about what happened to his eldest daughter. It's enough to hang hope on.
When we went back to the cell phone provider, the only thing that we had that they could tell us is that there was a 911 call made from that cell phone at 9:02, which was some 17 minutes after the jet had piled into the thing.
9:02:07. He tells it to everyone he talks to. He clings to it for dear life, because of course it is.
I need to know where she was when she made that call, because that will tell me whether she was downstairs just getting off the path and maybe in a void someplace downstairs, or whether I have to understand that she was upstairs on 102 and have to wonder whether she was able to get out or not able to get out.
By evening, David Vincent has pretty much worn out the corner of 26th and Lexington, and his cell battery is fading, so he moves on. Craig Spitzer is CEO of Alliance. 7 employees, everyone thought to be in the building that morning, are missing. He cannot, will not, bring himself to believe they're gone.
I'm not going to say that to you right now.
You can't?
No, and I won't. And I won't for myself, and I won't for the people in there.
In there is a room full of people who have loved someone too long to give up so soon, and what's left after hope is unthinkable. It is why they agreed to expose this rawest of human times to the glare of the camera lens, because maybe somebody out there has information about Roland, something that will keep his brother moving.
I go to sleep with hope, I wake up with none.
And perhaps somebody saw Eric in a stairwell racing to safety.
We don't know. Maybe he's out there someplace, got hit on the head, and he doesn't know who he is. You know, maybe he's unconscious and he didn't have any identification on him.
And as it turns out, nobody can say for sure that Melissa was in the office for that 8:30 meeting.
I have to tell you, Craig, that's the best news that I could possibly hear, because what you're telling me is you can't confirm Melissa in that office space, and that's what I had to know. Yeah. That's what keeps me going.
So if you know anything about Melissa, call her father. He'd give anything to hear her holler at him again. Candy Crowley, CNN, New York.
Our internet site provides a special service for those seeking information about people missing after the attacks. You can post the person's name and picture on our website. Information on the missing can be sent to us at missing@cnn.com.
CNN has learned that Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon offering to allow a meeting between his foreign minister, Shimon Peres, and Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat, but there's a condition. Mr. Sharon says there must first be what he's calling an absolute calm for 48 hours in the region. The Israeli leader had earlier vetoed the meeting. Arafat is reported as saying he's ready to meet with Peres, in his words, anytime, any place. Let us take a moment now to update you on the latest developments. CNN has learned that Pakistan will demand Afghanistan's Taliban rulers turn over Osama bin Laden. A top Pakistani official travels to Kandahar, Afghanistan tomorrow to deliver the ultimatum with a 3-day deadline. Now, the Afghan Islamic Press news agency says bin Laden has denied any involvement in the U.S. terror attack.
The grim task of clearing debris from the fallen World Trade Center towers goes on in New York City. Mayor Rudy Giuliani says authorities are taking it day by day and deciding when the search changes from a rescue to a recovery operation. On the investigative front, the Justice Department says a second suspect has been arrested by the FBI. He's considered a material witness in the terrorist attacks.
Now, the Bush administration working on its plans for an appropriate U.S. response. Mr. Bush met Saturday with his national security advisors at Camp David. He also called the leaders of Mexico and Spain as part of his effort to build an international coalition against terrorism.
As rubble is cleared away from the crash site at the Pentagon, officials there have announced the first confirmed death. That confirmation puts the revised death of Pentagon-related missing and presumed dead at 187. Also Saturday, the Pentagon gave a name to the U.S. military's mission to secure America's borders and lend support to civil authorities. It is Operation Noble Eagle.
All right, returning now to Pakistan. That's where opponents of President Pervez Musharraf are warning against the country offering too much cooperation to the United States. CNN's Mike Chenoy standing by in Lahore with details of that. Mike?
Jim, 42 political parties and religious organizations have just concluded a meeting here in Lahore agreeing to send a message to President Pervez Musharraf. That message very clear that they do not want his government to allow the United States to use air, sea, or land space of Pakistan to help in any American attack on targets in Afghanistan. The group is actually going up to Islamabad to convey that message in person to the Pakistani leader. It was a virtual who's who of key figures from the Islamic fundamentalist sector of Pakistani society, including some religious organizations with long-standing and very close ties to the Taliban leadership in Afghanistan. In addition, representatives of key political parties that have been sidelined from the political scene here since President Musharraf took power in a coup d'etat were also here. Some of the statement did express some condolence for the deaths in the United States, but some of the religious leaders were very firm in saying that any U.S. attack on Afghanistan would be considered as an attack on Pakistan, and one religious leader saying that the Mujahideen, the holy warriors of his party, would join the fight against the U.S. if military action took place. So that certainly makes General Musharraf's job of making Pakistan a meaningful ally of the United States much harder, and it certainly does raise the specter of some kind of unrest or opposition to such policies once the details of what Pakistan in fact is going to do to help the U.S. become clearer. Jim?
All right. Mike Chenoy reporting there from Lahore. Ralitza?
Jim, amid the many stories of loss and devastation are some incredible stories of survival. Amy Lowe was in the lobby of the Marriott Hotel when the World Trade Center came crashing down on top of it. Maggie Rivera was a security guard there. And now they both join us. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to go first to Amy. Tell us what happened as you were standing there in that lobby.
When the first plane has crashed, I didn't even know it was crashed, so I was asked by the security to go downstairs to the basement of the hotel to help out Maggie answering the phone, to call out for the ambulance, the cops, anything you could think of, and receiving calls for help. And secondly, I got a call saying, "Oh, your plane, your building got hit again." And I'm like, oh my God, you know, what else can we do? And I'm like, Maggie, and Maggie's like, why don't you go? I'm like, no, we're gonna stay here together. If I go, you go together with me. Then we went upstairs. This was when both buildings was hit already. And by the time we went upstairs to the lobby, everybody has evacuated the building already. And the only person that's allowed to be on the lobby of the Marriott was the firemen, and also the security, the managers of the building. And
yeah, Amy, I'd like to ask Maggie, what was it like For her, she's a security guard, she has some special training. What was it like for you to go through something like this?
Actually, it was very devastating. I was trying my very best to assist and answer all the questions, to evacuate all my co-workers, the guests that were at the hotel. I assured them that I was going to get them all out, and we did. We evacuated. When the first plane hit, we managed to get everybody out, and we only had management in the lobby with security, myself, and Jade, who stood alone with me by my side at all times.
Was there any panic, confusion, Maggie?
Yes, there was a lot of panic, but I assured my co-workers and the guests that everyone was going to be okay and we were going to get them out safely and as quickly as we possibly could.
Amy, to you, what was it like getting out of there? Could you see where you were going? Did you know exactly where to go, what direction to take?
When the building has, when the first tower collapsed down and the parts of the building collapsed on the Marriott, and the whole Marriott collapsed down too, onto our ceiling, just fell on top of us. At that time, in total darkness, all you can depend on is just, you could just depend on the sound if anybody is next to you walking around, and you hear firemen themselves panicking, saying, don't panic, let's go to the right, let's go to the left, let's go here, no, somebody has fallen down. No, I mean, it's like it's all based on fear. You could hear the voice of panic and fear in the fireman's voice. And of course, myself, I'm like really like nervous already, and I can't see all the stuff is like all over your face, all over your mouth. You know, you're choking, like I'm gagging for oxygen, and all you care about is trying to find an exit to get out of that rumble.
Maggie, what was it like for you to kind of try to lead people and help them out? What instincts started working in you?
Well, I was very calm because we have that training. I've been doing security for 13 years. I was very calm. We were dealing mainly with the fire department because that's all we had in the lobby, because we had no guests and no other employees except, like I said, head of the departments like engineering, my department, housekeeping. So we had only the major management from each department. So we dealt like with a lot of firemen. We must have had close to 80 firemen in the lobby at the time when the building had collapsed. So they were looking for someone who would know how to get out, and I assisted them and telling them, no, let's go this way. But when we couldn't get out through one way, which was the tall ship's bar, we turned around and tried to get out through another exit, which would lead through the elevators. We couldn't get out that way, and the next thing we knew, because we had no light whatsoever except one small flashlight, and there we walked onto this debris, and we walked over to the top of it, which it was just building beams and the ceiling, and we climbed up a mountain of debris when we saw the light and the fog, and from there the firemen just helped us out because they had just as much fear in trying to get out as we did, that we were the only ones there with them.
And Maggie, from the pre-interview that I had reading about your experience there, there were, as you mentioned, probably 80 firefighters trying to help out, and
yes,
only 4 or 5 of them got out alive.
I wouldn't be able to say if it was actually 4 or 5. I know I hanged on to 2 or 3 of them. They were helping me get out, and I'm very appreciative because if it wasn't for them, I really don't know how I would get out, because they pulled me out of the debris. They fell on me from the impact, and as they were getting up, they picked me up with them, and I escorted them as best as I could because I knew the pattern of the lobby on how to get out, but I had not the slightest idea that all this debris was on us, and from there is when we climbed over a mountain of debris to get out.
And also that since there's a bunch of other firemen, they were in the middle of the lobby, and also the chief sent a group of firemen upstairs to the 22nd floor of the Marriott, the highest floor, to clean up and to see if anybody's there. That's when everybody, you know, when the building collapsed. So I definitely know that there's still some people up, you know, down there. So that's why, like, you know, I call here so that people can know that there's still some firemen that's up there in the building that collapsed when everything came down.
Amy, how has this changed your life?
Oh, totally.
Well, yeah.
Oh,
It's like at nighttime when you sleep, you can't even sleep because in the dark, since you have faced that 1 minute of darkness, of death, it's like everything's going to happen in the dark. And when the time comes, time for you to sleep, you can't sleep. You know, every single minute it hits me, and we'll have a breakdown. I mean, it's just that things of these will stay in our life. The rest of our lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maggie, what about you?
Yes, let me tell you, this is like a second life for me. My parents, I'm telling you, they've been very supportive because I've also was here for the 1993 bombing, and I've overcome that fear, and to think that this has happened again and I had to relive this is very, how would you say, I can't think of it in English. I can only think of it in Spanish.
I don't think that there are words that can describe this.
No, it's worse than the word fear or terrified. It's worse than that. You can't describe it.
Amy, let me ask you this. If you had something to say to the perpetrators of this tragedy, of this terrorist act, again, this just, it's beyond words to describe this act, but what would you tell the perpetrators of this act?
I would say that how can a human being with feelings and emotion can do such a thing, you know, to hurt more people? I just don't understand it. I just don't understand.
Amy Lowe, Maggie Rivera, thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim.
Really, it's amazing accounts, and as these personal accounts, as these words, people struggling even to find words, echo around the world in media coverage. When you see these things like this, you understand why international support for a military response, at the same time as building one of the United States' firmest backers, is Britain. Just a short while ago, Prime Minister Tony Blair told CNN's Christiane Amanpour that the world was at war with terrorism.
I'm very pleased at the way that America and the American administration has gone out of its way to consult its allies, to keep us fully informed so that we are part of the deliberations they're making. But we have to do two things, in my view. First of all, there has to be a response to bring those terrorists who committed this attack to account, and we will play our full part in that. And secondly, there has then to be an agenda that we construct at an international level that involves the whole of the international community in dismantling the machinery of international terrorism, how it's financed, how these people move about the world, the countries that then harbour them and give them help. At every single level, we have to pursue and dismantle this machinery of terror. And that is important, not just for the purpose of bringing those people to account, but also in order to make sure that this does not happen again. Well, we've made it very clear that we stand side by side with the United States. And it's not a question of the United States simply saying, this is what we're going to do now, come and join us. The US is in close consultation with us and with other allies, and I think there will be a very broad support for a response that allows us to pursue and bring to account those responsible for this act, and do it as an act of justice. It's fairly clear where the evidence is tending, but I think it is important that we consider the evidence in a very careful way, that it's factually based, that we are hard-headed about it, but once we have come to a conclusion, then it is important that we hold those people who are responsible for this, as I say, to account. And I think you will find, incidentally, that that is the view right round the world. I've spoken to Arab leaders in the past few days that have expressed their outrage at what has happened, their determination that this should be seen as something that the world of Islam is standing against, not merely countries like America and the United Kingdom. And I think you will find that there is enormous support for the idea that we must put together a broad-based coalition that hound these people down and that bring them to account, and do it, as I say, for reasons of justice. We owe it to those people that lost their lives, to their families who are grieving, and to our own defence of democracy and liberty and freedom.
That was British Prime Minister Tony Blair. In Russia, the memory of terrorist bombings in Moscow and other cities 2 years ago heightens sympathy for the victims of Tuesday's attacks, but Russian officials are saying they've been warning against such attacks for some time now. Jill Doherty has a story.
Russia is telling the West, we tried to tell you. Terror in the United States or terror in Russia. It's all controlled by international terrorist organizations, they say. The #1 criminal suspect in both countries, Osama bin Laden. The FSB, successor to the KGB, tells CNN it knew where bin Laden was hiding before the attacks on the U.S. and informed other special services. He's since changed his location, the FSB says, but is still in Afghanistan. And the agency vows to find out where he is and inform its Western colleagues.
Russia has never tried to kill Osama bin Laden. We usually deal with infiltrating criminals, arresting them, and turning them over to the courts to be punished. That's what I think should be done. However, we have experience where, when a suspect offers armed resistance, in order to avoid casualties, it is possible to kill him.
President Vladimir Putin says he's been warning the West since he took office that there is a worldwide network of fanatical terrorists funded primarily by drug money. They're fighting in Chechnya, he claims, and are responsible for a wave of apartment house bombings that hit Russia 2 years ago. But the West, Moscow says, spent too much time scolding Russia for how it dealt with the threat.
I think now they understand that it is not just our internal issue. It's a problem for the entire international community.
Evil must be punished, says the Russian president.
But we should not become like bandits that act from behind a corner. We should consider our decisions and proceed from true facts.
The attacks in the United States, he says, could be compared in scale and cruelty to what the Nazis were perpetrating. I feel guilty for what has happened, Vladimir Putin says. We spoke so much about this threat, but apparently not enough. Jill Doherty, CNN, Moscow.
People from all over the world are expressing their sympathy and their support. That includes the Middle East. Thousands of Israelis took part in rallies in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Israeli Foreign Minister Shimon Peres telling the crowd in Tel Aviv the U.S. leads the struggle for freedom, for security, and for humanity. Kuwaitis gathered at blood banks to donate blood for the victims of the attacks. Donors say they want to show their gratitude for U.S. involvement in the Gulf War after Iraq's invasion in 1990. Egyptian Foreign Minister Ahmed Maher signed a book of condolences at the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. After that ceremony, the Egyptian official urged the world community to hold an international conference against terrorism. Meantime, in Britain, soccer players observed a minute of silence and wore black armbands on the field as a sign of mourning.
Iraq's leader Saddam Hussein has issued his first full statement regarding the terror attacks. Rula Amin has more from Baghdad.
Iraq's President Saddam Hussein, in a message to the American people, appealed for serenity.
America needs wisdom, not power. It has used power along with the West to the extreme extent, only to find out later that it doesn't achieve what they wanted. Will the rulers of America try wisdom just for once so that their people can live in security and stability?
The tone of this letter, read on state television, more muted than his first reaction. The day after Tuesday's attacks, he had said, despite the conflicting human feelings, what happened was a result of America's foreign policy, if the attackers were indeed not Americans, he said. And he pointedly did not condemn the attacks. He's still not condemning them. But this time, he called the attacks evil inflicted on America and called for restraint. He also referred to the harassment of Arab Americans and American Muslims in the United States. He said that despite the pain he says Arabs and Muslims have suffered from the United States, he says they never harassed Westerners who walked in the streets of Baghdad and other Arab capitals. In his 12-page letter, Saddam Hussein questioned the motives of any military attack, and although he acknowledged U.S. might, he questioned the use of it.
We ask again, America aiming the fire of its weapons on a specific target, harming it or destroying it with the support of the West, would it solve the problem?
The official newspapers, which had withheld comments since Tuesday, echoed the same line. As for Iraqis, the government wouldn't allow us to interview them. Iraqis blame the United States for their 10 years of suffering under UN sanctions. They also remember the loss of lives they suffered during the Gulf War.
The people we talked to off camera had conflicting feelings. On one hand, they were satisfied to see the American government under attack. On the other hand, they sympathized with the victims. They told us they know very well what's it like to be one.
But mostly, they don't believe Iraq was involved and fear the United States will use the attacks as an excuse to hit Iraq. Many say, with the unlimited support the U.S. has now, the United States won't have to show solid proof if it decides that Iraq has either lent a hand to the attackers or supported other terrorists. And that, again, the Iraqi people will be under the fire of U.S. might. Rula Amin, CNN, Baghdad.
Well, with the threat of a U.S. retaliatory attack looming large, international humanitarian agencies have evacuated their staff from the Afghan capital, Kabul. Pakistan is bracing for an influx of Afghani refugees across their long shared border. Secretary of State Colin Powell says Pakistan has agreed to a list of requests from Washington that includes closing its border to Afghanistan. But that's a difficult task. Thousands of Afghanis who fled the Taliban rule are already living in squalid refugee camps inside Pakistan.
The heightened tensions place 8 international aid workers on trial in Afghanistan in an even more precarious situation. Sheila Cast reports.
24-year-old Heather Mercer was excited last spring about going to Afghanistan with a Christian aid group.
She was trying to think of ways that she could really blend into the culture, and she just really wanted to immerse herself in another culture.
But within 5 months, Mercer and 7 other Westerners were arrested, charged with trying to convert Muslims to Christianity, a very serious charge in Afghanistan. And then this happened.
To the extent that governments such as the Taliban government in Afghanistan support such things, you need to understand you cannot separate your activities from the activity of these perpetrators.
Afghanistan, where Mercer is on trial, is at the top of the potential target list for U.S. military retaliation because of Afghanistan's support for Osama bin Laden, the top suspect in the terror attacks. So on Thursday, U.S. and German diplomats pulled out of Afghanistan, along with United Nations and some Red Cross workers. There is no one from the U.S. there to continue negotiations about Mercer and the other American, Dana Curry. Even Heather's mother, Deborah Oddie, who had just arrived in Afghanistan on Tuesday, was forced to leave. Her head covered as required, she told reporters it was, quote, devastating to leave after just one visit with her daughter.
It sounds like she's in a dangerous situation as it is, and now with what's happened in the last week, that's heightened.
Everyone's prayer is that just God brings her through this safely. She's expelled from the country. That's our best hope.
To be expelled rather than forgotten as the United States decides the next step in its new war on terrorism. Sheila Cast for CNN, Washington.
Well, finally, as we conclude this hour's coverage, a group of New Yorkers congregated outside the city armory
to pray for those still missing after Tuesday's tragedy.